Man versus animal.
Versus what?
Animal versus man.
Yeah, how London street gangs actually work. Now, we watched a video similar to this about
Women.
grooming.
Yeah.
Out here finessing these young niggas, man.
Social media on the screen. Get into it. Follow the Twitch. Yeah. Let's do it.
My name is Omar Sharif. I was formerly involved in gang activity in London.
Oh shit.
And this is how crime works. I was involved in gangs from 2005 until 2011. I'm grateful that I'm still alive, although I've come very close to losing my life inside of gangs. I've had a bunch of knives put to my neck, stomach. I've been stabbed twice in my right leg. I've had guns put to me. The structure of a gang is almost like being in employment. Okay, you have the newbies that come involved, you're gonna have management, you're gonna have senior management. I got involved in a gang when I was around 13 years old, actually from selling sweets in school. I was approached one day by someone who said, you know, how would you like to make more money? And initially I knew what he was talking about, I was scared, but when he started mentioning things about, you know, you can be a man, you can provide for, help your parents at home. And when you come from a council flat estate and, you know, sometimes things are not easy, that kind of languaging is enough to make you say, well, okay, can I actually do this? When you join at the age that I did, you're considered a younger. A younger is the street soldier. A younger is the person who just gets employed into the gang. As part of the gang initially as a younger were to hold certain things, were to make deliveries, were to be on call. You're told where to go, what to do, not to look into bags, not to look into boxes. It's just, you're a yes man. And we look up to our elders. So our elders are the people that we aspire to be. The ones that have the money, you know, at the time they had the Gucci belts, the Rolexes, the gold teeth, the nice cars. In a gang, the older is not always in charge, but he is almost like middle management. So he takes control of what gets moved in and out of the area, who's selling what on certain streets, money management, distribution, and he or she, it can be a she as well, they'll have the connections to the people at the top. So it's kind of a chain of command. So they're the ones who normally even groom people into a gang. They're the ones who, when things go a bit sour and people get, you know, hit on, beaten up, sometimes kidnapped, sometimes threatened, it's the elders that they call. But I know from experience that even the elders who we looked up to, they are speaking to people above them. I've seen people who are above the elders who look nothing like us, who don't sound like us at all. I can guess the jobs that they do, and they are very embedded into society, which was quite an eye-opener for me because I thought even as a young black guy in London, it's only guys like me that do this kind of stuff. But actually, we're just their foot soldiers. So even our elders who we wanted to become, they're still the S-man for someone else. The people who are above our elders in the gang, the highest on the hierarchy, from what I understood, this couple, they were massive on the real estate scene in the UK. They were not involved in themselves in the dirty work, but a lot of the money that went going into their businesses came from the money that a lot of the foot soldiers, the youngers like myself, will be making and passing up the food chain. It's scary to think that when you go to a bank or you're speaking to a lawyer or you're walking into Greater London and you're talking to someone that's quite high up in business, for example, they have interesting habits on the side or hobbies on the side because I've seen it with my own eyes.
The money.
The way that street gangs make their money here in London, there are things like kidnappings, there are hits where someone wants someone to be hurt or killed. But the most common way, which I'd say is what you hear of or see most of day to day, is by selling drugs. Gangs normally have things called trap houses or bandos. Trap houses are places where drugs will be sold from, where they could be stored, weapons. Gang members will be living there. or looking after the place, for example. And these are required in a number of ways. So these could be places where squatters have been for a while. It could be someone else's home that belongs to the gang. And these are safe spots for the gang. So if anything happens, you'll get a call saying, right, meet us at the trap house. We know where that is. The address is never texted over a phone. It's never spoken over a phone. It's always told, verbally, so there's no trace as to where it could be. And if they're in the area the gang belongs to, the police immediately will make a connection. Gang wars can start over the smallest things or the biggest things. Smallest things could be they were at a club or a rave, and from there someone gets stabbed, and then it's a whole, we need to retaliate, we need to send a message, we need to show them who we are. So they round up everyone, and then it's now not just one person versus one person, it's actually a gang versus gang, postcode versus postcode, and now we're talking 50 to 100 people plus. It got to a point where we were having postcode wars, meaning it was my block, NW1 versus NW5. These gang wars started because people started to become greedy. People were looking for power, people were looking for just to be significant, and also people wanted to rise up. Postcode wars are also named interstate wars. This is something that started even in the 60s, 70s, which areas became smaller or bigger, and it's a way of protecting territory. Now there are things called block wars, estate wars, which are even within the same postcode. There is such rivalry, there is such demand for who is more important. So it goes from area, postcode, now to blocks, which creates further division. Years ago, it seemed to be more of a reason as to why they go into war, because something big happened. Even recently, I was mentoring about 10 young boys from a school, and one of them said to another one something offensive about his mum, and that spilled out from school. And because it was filmed and put on social media, one of them actually ended up getting stabbed. There was a video of around, to me, looked like 60 people having a fight. I could see weapons, I saw machetes coming out. What are they fighting over? Essentially, it's nothing, really. Those fights are not happening over drugs, not happening over a threat from someone outside. It's just two male egos that can't have a conversation, and it has to result in violence, and then sometimes even death.
Put the ego down.
Although guns are easy to source, knives are still the bigger problem. We hear more deaths happening from knives than gunshots, for sure. Maybe because the laws around knives aren't that regulated, because they say if you carry a knife, you go to prison for 4 years, but then I hear people getting 3, 4, 5 warnings. So people aren't really taking the law seriously. And nowadays, when you hear about someone being stabbed, it's a younger against a younger. Olders don't get involved with stuff like that. And these youngers are not going to be able to get a hold of a gun unless they steal it from someone or steal it from the trap house, for example. For any under 18-year-old to get a knife, it's as easy as going onto Amazon and clicking something for next day delivery, and it gets delivered. It's not regulated. I know even on Snapchat, there are accounts on Snapchat every day where they say, hey, we have 5 machetes, we have 5 army knives with knuckle dusters attached to it. Who wants this? I've seen axes with chains. Why are they making these things? Why are they not asking for proof of ID? Some website might say you must be over 18 to buy this. That has never deterred anyone under 18 to say, okay, I shouldn't do this. They don't know that by making that sale and then delivering it to that house, that young person goes and kills someone here. They're part of that cycle, but they're so far attached from that. In the UK, there is a law around carrying a knife around the size of the blade itself being less than 3 inches. It has to be foldable, and you shouldn't be carrying it for the wrong reasons. I've been stopped and searched before, and sometimes I did have a knife on me, but I did have a foldable knife, and I wasn't in a state of anger. So the guy said to me, actually, if he caught me and I was in a state of anger, then he would have arrested me. And that made me realize, actually, they don't have a correct way of policing this, because I knew so many guys who would carry bigger blades than that, ones that you can't fold. And they'd be walking with those on high streets, for example. I've never heard of someone going to prison for carrying a knife. So I grew up in Marylebone, which essentially is a very, very nice area. However, there is a division, because there's one side of Marylebone where you have very nice mansions and nice flats with nice cars. That's not where I lived. I lived on the other side. I lived on the other side where it's council flats, it's block towers. Even though it's on our doorstep, we're brought up with a mindset and a belief system that we're not good enough for that. It's easy for anyone to be interested in joining a gang for many reasons. For young people, normally it's to do with money. The other main reason is that belonging. It's having a family, having that brotherhood, a sisterhood. We don't go to private schools, right? We go to just public schools, and that's where it all starts. I didn't run to a gang and say, hey, I want to be in your gang to make money. I tried to go down the proper route. You know, I borrowed some clothes to go to interviews. I applied for 50 jobs when I left school, and no one said yes to me. If society is not allowing me to make money in this way, but there's a lifestyle which could, where do I go? The first thing they do is befriend you, is they welcome you in, so they make you feel a part of a family. The second thing is to spoil you somehow. You know, if they know you need money, they give you some money. If they know you're hungry, you get some food. Then they test you somehow. They may ask you to hold something for them, they may ask you to be somewhere at a certain time. And normally, they've set something up to get you robbed on purpose. They set you up in some way to see what you say, because that's
crazy,
them
bro.
checking.
Cause that shit really happening. You feel me?
Yeah. Imagine you really like a 13-year-old nigga on that though. Like niggas, like nigga, I'd be like, yo, I'm sending my best man. Like it's really my son. Like yo, go fess this little nigga back out, really rip his shit. I'm like, yo, damn, like.
Can we trust this person? It's really bad the way they make you trust them and actually love them as a family, but you're just a pawn in a bigger game. In a gang, it's almost like putting together a fantasy football team. Different strengths. Someone could be fast, someone could be a good driver, someone could be a good fighter, someone could stab and not care about it, someone could steal. So when they recruit for a gang, I would say there are qualities that they look for. The number one thing they look for is loyalty, but they also look at how can they strengthen the gang? What can that person bring to the table? New gang members are recruited on a geographical basis. So the local recruitment is, I think, the priority for a gang, because they need to have numbers high. They need to have a certain amount of people on road doing certain things, a certain amount of people moving, distributing, managing. So in the UK, we have something called county lines. This is where a lot of the inner city gangs, there's no more territory. Everything's been divided up. So they're now thinking, all right, how can we expand? So county lines are where these gangs want to operate in smaller towns, smaller cities, rural areas, and they normally use young people for this. So you may have heard of a term going OT, which is going out of town, and they're facilitated by the elders. So the elders would have someone in place who may live in a smaller town. They may have someone who has a farmhouse somewhere, train tickets, everything is paid for the young person. They're given a budget, they're given money for lunch and things like that. They'll tell them to dress how they dress normally. They'll give them a backpack, say, look, don't open a backpack, here's the address, go here, wait here, or call this number, for example. The whole point of doing that is so that the police will say, well, it's a young person, we don't have to search them. I think in some way the UK is influenced by the US, not just on the rap scene. I know the drill scene came out, but also there's always a bit of competition. For example, the USA, the Bloods versus Crips, that also came here in the UK, and that was a massive scene for a while. There was a period where it just became colours. So there was just the bandana, which represented which color, which gang you're from. That's really why we started to see, music videos become more grimy. We started to see more killings. We started to see more weapons on the street. So in the US, we have gangs like BMF and GD who've been going on for 30 years plus, Latin Kings. I feel that in the UK, gangs are more divided. Here in the UK, you can have an estate, a block, and even within that block, it's divided, block, from block to block, street to street. That's what I experienced, and nowadays I'm sure it's even worse. So the main difference for me is the size of the operation, but also it seems that they have more stability and more structure in the way that it creates longevity. I believe social media plays a massive role in the rise of gang violence because of the exposure that they get. I've interviewed a young person in prison, and he said the reason why he killed the people he's killed is because of songs that he'd listened to. He said he wanted to recreate that in real life. And I'm focused on young people because they're the vulnerable ones. They're the ones who aren't able to make a decision for themselves yet. I know for sure that there's going to be some collateral damage from these things, because when you listen clearly, if you can understand what they're saying in these drill songs, it's scary. What's allowed to be sold and listened to publicly and shared on radios, for example, because young people will listen to that and they want to replicate that because they think, okay, he is now my role model, my idol. For me to be deemed as someone successful, I need to do what he's doing. For children to avoid being targeted for gangs, it comes down to discipline for me. It's really understanding what you're getting yourself into. I think the way gangs are policed nowadays, it's difficult because it made me feel so embarrassed, to be stopped and searched in front of my mum, and she cried at home saying, why do they think my son is this kind of person? And I hated seeing her upset. But if I put their hat on, I think, right, well, if we stop and search everyone that looks like the criteria or stereotype, we could find another weapon and take it off the streets. For me, that's the wrong approach, because not everyone who looks a certain way belongs in that stereotype. I think stop and search should be reviewed as a policy, because if you find one young person and he's carrying a knife that's under 3 inches long that is foldable, they'll take it away, slap on the wrist, have a good day. Next day, he'll go find exactly the same knife from somewhere else, carry it again. Instead of creating or deepening that hate, you should try and create a relationship by doing things like going into schools. I've always said that you need to speak their language. If you want to police them, sit down and talk to them. A brother of a friend of mine, a while back, he was caught on the streets. He didn't have a lot of drugs on him, but he had enough, and he was arrested and went to prison for a short while. If someone said to him, hey, listen, we know what you're doing out here, how about we offer you an opportunity to earn money with us, or we'll find you a job? And you've got to think of it like this: prison is a business. Every single person that gets put into prison, someone's getting paid. It's a good deterrent for some people, because some people might take that as a lesson, saying, well, oh, I know a friend of mine was carrying something and got arrested, I shouldn't do it too. But for the most people, it's not enough. In prison, there's more going on there than on the streets. And this is what we don't hear about on the news. There's people dying in prisons. The gangs are still doing the same thing in prison. I believe wealth inequality definitely contributes towards gang activity, gang violence. The way these gangs make their money, and also from personal experience, is through drugs, predominantly. If 90% of the money comes from drugs and you make it legalized, one thing can happen, that there's going to be too much demand for it. So either the gang will start fighting even more because now they've got an open market, for example, or it could destabilize them, because the second that companies here, pharmaceutical companies, will start getting involved, and they're massive players, that will completely eliminate the gangs. So will they have money to buy weapons? Will they have money to even fund gang wars anymore? It probably wouldn't happen. For many young people who carry knives, one of the reasons, one of my initial reasons, was because we feel unsafe, or we've heard about people being stabbed and we won't be able to protect ourselves. I don't think there's a quick fix to trying to make a young person feel safe. The way to solve the issue and deter them from it isn't by fear, because that doesn't work. It's by re-educating them on the consequences of these things. And I say giving people an opportunity, showing people more love. These people that are involved in gangs, they did everything they did because they wanted to feel love from people. They didn't get love from home. They didn't get that affection at home. But when they did something, the gang showed them a respect, and that's what drew them in even deeper. One thing I know that's changed over the years, and that would still help other people feel safe in gang-led areas, is the presence of youth centres. And these were places where you could have rival gangs come to the same building, make music together, play pool together, play basketball together, and it was a place of safety. When you have something that you're passionate about and have something that you care about, it removes the amount of time you spend with the gang. It removes the amount of time you spend on the streets. Schools do have a big part to play in gang culture, and it works both ways, because I've seen how if you have a school that's in the middle of 3 areas that are having a war, for example, then you have a big issue, because then you have, just like in prison, you have gang activity happening at school. It will take a community approach to remove or reduce, gang violence and gang activity, but I think it has to be a complete united front from all levels of society.
I've had enough.
If I had to look at London gangs 10 years from now, I can see the problem becoming deeper. I can see a culture which is being even more embedded into society. I think London gang culture will become almost like a standard for other gangs and other countries. There are young people who don't look at the seriousness of this. They will see it as it's cool. They will see it as it's a thing to be, just like I did when I was young. So, yeah, 10 years from now is a scary place, especially as a parent. trying to get out of a gang is one of the hardest things you can do. I didn't have a choice. It got to a point where I had to go out of the ends. So leaving the area where I was from, I had to move to a different area. And this is because I've seen people die. This is because I got attacked. I'd been stabbed myself. And I just knew in my mind there were two directions for me. There was prison, or there was being stabbed or ending up dead. But it was in that moment of darkness where I realized I need to make a bigger decision. I need to make a decision of what I'm going to do with my life. But it took me going and speaking to the people who were my elders and saying, and exactly telling them what I'm telling you right now on camera, is that I've had enough, and that, you know, my mental health at the time wasn't in a good place. I wasn't able to speak to any of them ever again. I wasn't welcomed. I was actually advised to stay out of the area because I was actually able to get out of the situation. I feel a responsibility to be a voice to other people. Since leaving the gang, my number one priority was to work on myself to become a better person. So right now, I'm a mentor and a coach. As a mentor, I work with young people in schools, prisons, universities, helping them understand their mindset, helping them to make better decisions. And as a peak performance coach, I'm working with individuals to do exactly the same thing, but also to help them understand what drives them as humans. There are definitely aspects of being around the gang activity that I do regret. But right now, what I'm doing with young people, adults, and people at all levels of society, I wouldn't be able to have those conversations if I didn't go through what I've been through.
Like, I really do hope.
Imagine hearing like every nigga over 30 say the same exact thing, bro, and still just being like, you know what, bro, maybe it'll be different for me, man.
Nah, yeah. Because I say the same words, like niggas still not capturing them. This being right here is a dangerous game.